So here we are for the increasingly inappropriately named James S. A. Corey Writes a Novel.
Yes.
Yeah. James S. A. Corey displays all of the ways in which real life intrudes on writing a novel.
Hey, there's 2 novels in progress.
Yes, in progress, but not progressing particularly. I should have been doing a whole lot more this morning. But
So this is a bad time to ask, how's it going?
oh, it's you know.
I
know.
do you read Variety?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah,
So,
no, we
That's going.
we have a day gig.
Yeah. And a friend of mine just got a job on another show and has been like, hey, I want to hire you to consult on my show. So we'll see if that happens. But if it does, that may be an additional day gig occasionally.
I'm just going to try writing some books.
Look at you guys, like, all working.
Hang out at home and writing some books. Yeah.
So what we've been talking, a thing that has come up multiple times in the videos, and we've answered questions on multiple times, is the role of the beta reader in writing and publishing. And so we, right from the beginning, we were just like, hey, at some point we should have Carrie on to talk about being the beta reader for all, like, pretty much every James S. A. Corey book. And since we're not getting any real work done, we're like, it'd be great. Let's interview Carrie about being a beta reader. Since we don't have any real work to talk about.
So we have somebody who can actually say things and have insights that we haven't already chewed over. And
it's not just Daniel and I explaining why we didn't get any work done.
Yeah, no, we've done that a lot. That's that's kind of a subgenre.
So I'm going to introduce you. So this is Carrie Vaughn. If you read, you probably have heard of her. She wrote a long-running series about a werewolf named Kitty. How many books did that go? 12, 15?
14 novels and
14 novels.
3 short story collections.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a very long-running series. Pretty much right from the go, it was a huge success. So you probably have heard of Carrie. She has written many things that are not about Kitty Norville, including her most recent book. Tell them about your most recent book, Carrie.
It's called The Naturalist Society, and it's historical fantasy about Victorian ornithologists and awkward love triangles and the magic of binomial nomenclature. A lot of Latin.
I fucking loved it. I thought it was one of the best things you've ever done. I really liked that book.
I haven't read Janae's copy yet. Janae has a copy of it, but she thinks it's the best thing you've ever written too. So you had 2 votes for best thing you've ever done.
My dad thinks it's the best thing I've ever done.
See, there's 3 votes now.
I really
okay. I'm gonna hold off because it's the best novel you've ever written.
Okay,
but I don't think anything tops that unicorn story.
That's I don't know about best, but it's certainly the most notorious thing I've ever written. I still think it's a sweet love story.
We're not going to spoil it, but Carrie wrote a story about people who are chasing a unicorn that has one of the most shocking endings ever.
It was awesome.
So,
yeah.
So anyway, if you can track down Carrie's work in novel and short story form, it's worth your time. But the main reason she's here, in spite of her own amazing success, is right from the beginning when Daniel and I first started working together. Without even asking me, Daniel was like, oh, I sent all my stuff to Carrie. She's my beta reader. And I was like, oh, I know Carrie. I like her. That's fine. So right from the beginning, whenever we had a completed novel, we would send it to Carrie. And she would read it for us. And then within some amount of time, like a week or so, we would get a letter back filled with thoughts and comments and line notes and all kinds of stuff. And we've been doing that for 11 novels now.
Something like that.
It's been a while, yeah.
And we will, assuming we ever actually finish the draft of this one we're working on, we will be sending that to you, then as well. So
the question is, why, since I wasn't there at the beginning, why did you start sending your books to Carrie as the beta? Oh, before we do that, Carrie and Daniel, what is the role of the beta reader in the process? And then we can start talking about why you became our beta reader.
I'm going to let Carrie start with it. I'm going to.
It is usually your first chance to get an outside take on your novel. Because if you've been working on a manuscript, it's too close to it. You're you can't see the forest for the trees. And the best way to get like an actual objective take on what is going on with all of these words that you have barfed onto the page is to get somebody that you trust to look at it and tell you what's actually going on. Like for me, for my work, I really need that because I always miss something. You know, I will think that I have, like the unicorn story, for example. I was sure I had written a nice romance, and it was when I sent it to the critique group and they were all just horrified and telling me what an awful person I was, that I was like, oh, there's something else going on here.
Great story. Yeah.
I didn't change it. Like, I didn't really change it that much. I'm like, ooh, they're horrified. This is good. But yeah, it's, I always miss something. I always, I just need that extra set of eyes on it. And, hopefully your reader is somebody who, okay, my screen is showing something going on here. Yeah, hopefully your reader is somebody who knows
at her
books,
parents' house. Maybe they have
can give you a good objective opinion.
Wi-Fi.
I liked it. It's fine is not really a good comment, or oh, I didn't like this. This is awful is also not good beta reading. You need somebody who's going to analyze it, pick apart where it went wrong, what's going right, and all that good stuff.
Anyway, Carrie was saying there's the idea of, you know, this is the first place you get your objective opinion or your secondary opinion. You have your experience with the thing that you're making, and then the time comes to have someone else. And like with the unicorn story, sometimes what you have written is very different on the page than it was in your head. And once upon a time, that was something that you would go to your editor for. And that still happens some, but over the course of even my career, the amount of extra shit we have been putting on editors for the things they need to do and the duties they have to perform and the meetings they have to take and the things they have to coordinate has gotten so gigantic that it pushes out a lot of the work where it's working with the text and working with the line. Ty and I still get some from the guys at Orbit, but we specifically asked for that. Mm-hmm. And there have been times when we had editors who they didn't have the spare cycles to do it. So being in a position where you have somebody who is a professional, who's somebody you trust, who's somebody who's experienced, who can look at this and say, did you mean to write the Adam and Eve story again? And you think, shit, no, I did not. Okay, let me. That's really useful.
And if I may add to that, that is also a thing people look for in writers groups, critique groups.
That's my dog.
So I'll wait for your dog to stop.
Thank you. Just give me a second here.
It's a thing people used to try to get from a writers group, and you still can in some cases. But there is a performative aspect to writers groups.
Yeah.
That sometimes interferes with getting clear feedback, where everybody's sort of competing to have the most interest. Oh my God. What is going on? I'm the only person with a quiet house.
Oh my God.
Jesus
Christ.
Well, now I don't feel so bad for the blender.
No.
I had to turn off my heater while you were gone, dude. This is a fucking mess. Okay, I think that's calm for the moment. We'll work around it. Cut that, or put it in. I don't know.
So the thing with an individual beta reader that you have a relationship with and that you trust is they're not performing. They're not trying to impress anybody with their insights, right? Which you can sometimes get in that circle of everybody trying to impress everybody else at the readers group.
Or you wind up with like whoever makes the first critique sets the tone for every other critique. Right. Where it's like the first guy didn't like it, and so the next guy thinks maybe they should, they kind of adjust their thing on the fly so that they had that same problem too, and then by the time you get all the way around the room, nobody's going to say I really liked it because then they look stupid, right? It's.
I'm going to push back a little.
Dynamics. There's dynamics. There can be dynamics.
If you're lucky enough to have a really good group, and I think at various points we've had good experiences. I learned to critique, in a critique group where we were going around the circle and everybody reading everybody's stuff. What I like better is kind of the smaller group, like the one that I had that was the best, that lasted the longest. I think there were 6 of us. There were only about 6 of us, and we were all like working towards professional publication. I mean, that's the other danger with writers groups is you have the one person who keeps bringing in the same short story over and over and over again, and they make changes every time, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. Or the person who never takes anybody's advice ever, and yet keeps bringing it. Like there's all of these dynamics, and that's like a whole other conversation there. But I learned, I learned to critique. I learned to read people's stuff with short stories, with sitting around in a short story workshop. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing that writing short stories does is the learning curve is a lot faster than if you're all sitting around critiquing novels. But I was able to take those skills then to novel critiquing and beta reading for novels.
Yeah, I think,
you do have to watch those dynamics.
Yeah. What I hear Ty saying is, with a beta reader, it is a relationship that's already established, and there's not the group dynamic complications don't come in.
Right. There is an element in a writers group. I'm not saying all writers groups are bad. That's not what my point was. My point was that there's this other element that you have to sort of mentally weed out. Like, that guy always hates everything. That guy always loves everything. They're the Russians and the American judges. You just got to discount their votes. And that person always agrees with whoever spoke first. And that person, and that person's very jealous of the fact that I've sold a story and they haven't. And so they're always going to shit on everything I do. Right. Where there's this element of you have to kind of mentally understand the group that you're in. Whereas with a beta reader, it is a one-on-one relationship. It removes a lot of that complication.
There's only one person you have to understand, and you made that decision when you panned the manuscript.
Them. You can't blame them.
And I think that's almost always the case with writers who work with good beta readers. Is it's somebody they knew, it's somebody they already know, somebody whose tastes they understand, and I do think that's an important element.
Well, and I can't speak to your experience, Carrie, but I've been in a lot of writers groups.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people critique my stuff, especially when I was starting up. Now here I am, my first novel came out like almost 19 years ago. And I sent it to Carrie. I've winnowed it down to, from of all of the voices I've had, and some of them are great voices, but and brilliant people, but the one I send to is Carrie.
Why?
Not to put you on the spot.
No, it's a good.
Yeah.
Carrie has consistently. Carrie does work I like. She does work I respect, and she's always been trying to grow as a writer. She's always been very focused on the text in ways that I really appreciate and feel, consonant with. She's also never there's a reciprocity. I've sent her my stuff. She sends me her stuff. Over the course of that, there's a trust that's built up. There are some lovely people who I've worked with who, even if I sent them my stuff, they wouldn't send me theirs, and that just feels weird. Then it feels like there's a favor that I'm asking of somebody instead of a relationship that I'm building. So we've had our stuff critiqued by George, and George is not going to send me his stuff. It's just there's a power dynamic that fails there. There are people who are lovely human beings and excellent writers who I've gotten to a different part of my career, and going back and asking them to read and critique my stuff starts getting awkward. There's a weirdness to it. So the fact that my career and Carrie's have kind of gone in lockstep, we both kind of started off at the same time. Carrie's been on the New York Times bestseller list. I've been on the New York Times bestseller list. So there's kind of equality to our careers that makes the rest of it possible.
Yeah, I hadn't articulated like that, but I think that's exactly right. That we came up through the ranks together. basically. And we've been, watching each other's careers. So I think we're also very in tune with each other's writings, that we've read so much of each other's writings that we kind of know what the project is.
So would you think then that if one of you had gotten enormous success and the other hadn't, it would have made that relationship more difficult?
I would say it has made other relationships more difficult. I don't know about ours, but because there's also been times when like I was up and you were down, or you were up and I was down. There's that part of what you and I'm, we're interviewing Carrie by me talking a bunch, but part of it is you find out who in that group does fall apart when that happens. And I'm not one of the guys that falls apart, and neither is Carrie. So even when there is that difference in kind of publishing status, neither of us was thrown off by it. And we had the opportunity to be.
Mm-hmm.
You're not given to bitter jealousies?
Sweet jealousies, like oh, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, a little. Yeah.
No.
So the that's the relationship piece of it. So Carrie, as a beta reader, when somebody gives you their book, Daniel gives you his book, or Jimmy gives you his book, what is it when you read a book that so you're specifically reading as a beta reader? I'm assuming that you go into it with a different mindset than you're reading a book that somebody gave you because they just want you to have it because you're their friend, right? There's a critical aspect you go in with. What is it that you're looking for when you read it? So as a beta reader,
a couple of levels, I think. And, for anyone who's got some lit theory under their belt, I kind of take a reader response stance. So I'm going in analyzing my own reactions to the text. So I start reading and listen to that little voice in my head that goes, something's not working. And it starts out as a gut feeling like, this chapter seems a bit weird. And then I will go in and say, okay, why is the chapter weird? And that's the note that I'll pass on. And at this stage, and the thing about critiquing your guys' work is like, you guys are pros, I could zip, if I wasn't reading critically, I could probably zip right through it and not have a single comment. And because this is the risk, like if I'm looking for things to be wrong, I will find them, which is why I kind of start with my own emotional reaction. And a lot of times I'll phrase it as, did you mean to do this? This is the reaction I'm having. Did you mean for me to have this reaction, or is this not what you meant for me to have? Did you want me to feel like this? Do you want me to be very angry at this character right here? Did you, or here's what I think you're setting up. If this isn't what you're intending to set up, then you need to go back and look at it. But yeah, it's very much like, oh, I love this part. Why did I love it? And give you that note. Or there's something off in there. I know I've given you notes just on like sheer pacing, like you did a 2-beat setup here and it should be a 3-beat setup, that kind of thing. And a lot of that just comes from experience, from just having read so much that when I feel that something's wrong, I need to go back and figure out what it is. And that's the note I'll give you. So yeah, in some level, it's just pure emotion. Especially for you guys, I don't do line edits. I'm not going through, often, especially for the last couple of books, we've been on a time crunch. You guys are on deadline and I need to get you your notes back, maybe a little faster than I would have. So I'm not going to bother like typos. Although there was the one search and replace mishap.
Yeah.
On one of the Expanse books where I'm like, oh, by the way, there was a rather major search and replace mishap that you might want to look at. So, a newer writer, I might do a little more line editing because there might be stuff that they're not aware of. But especially for you guys, I'm mostly, this is my emotional response. Is this the emotional response you were going for? And then every now and then there's like my quirky idiosyncratic reactions. Like I remember writing you guys basically a big essay on what it's like to be a 14-year-old girl when Teresa's point of view came along. I'm like, all 14-year-old girls are angry. here's why. And and stuff like that. And that's always a thing. You are going to bring your own perspective to whatever it is you're reading. But I think as long as you're aware, like I try to be aware that this is my idiosyncratic reading, but what I want you guys to be aware of is this is the reader's reaction, and is it what you guys were going for?
Well, and there's this kind of parallax that comes in where we have what we intended, and then we see what you saw in it, and then we can kind of understand better what's actually on the page between those two.
Yeah, it's a calibration.
And even in the situations where you have a take that you have a note we don't take, that happens. I have given you notes you don't take.
Yeah.
That's part of the gig, but understanding what somebody else's experience was lets you see it differently. Lets you see it fresh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If I thought a scene was supposed to be suspenseful, but you see what's coming a mile away and therefore all the suspense is just not there, that's the kind of thing I want to know, right?
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that I think that Daniel and I have talked about that is important to us is having a female perspective on the work. That when a couple of dudes are writing stuff that has female characters in it, or characters that identify as female,
the chance to show your ass is pretty big.
Yeah. And having somebody read it from that perspective and say, no woman would ever think this, or no woman would ever say this out loud.
I remember having a couple of notes. It's nice to have that as a backstop. Yeah. I remember on Leviathan Wakes, I had a couple of notes on that topic.
We had a course correction after Leviathan Wakes too. I mean, if you look, when we wrote Leviathan Wakes, we were very careful to have the world building support that story, because we had like women in positions of power. We had women who were, excelled in their field, who were treated with respect. But we had two point of view characters who were very much dudes. And it came across a little more testosterone-y than perhaps we had intended. And then you see what happens in Caliban's, right? Yeah. It's, we heard what you said.
Well, and that's kind of the great thing about having that relationship and that kind of beta reader trust is like, I can give a note like that and know you're going to listen. You're not going to blow me off.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Chicks, what do they know?
Chicks, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you're the kind of person who blows off that kind of stuff, you're probably not the kind of person who elects to have a beta reader.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, that is, so I have worked with people in the sort of critique world who clearly did not listen to anything anyone ever said. And in fact would do passive aggressive stuff. Like you would give a note on something, and then the next month there would be a scene in the newly written material where somebody in the course of the text addresses a similar thing and talks about how stupid it is.
Yeah, we're not in that group anymore. That's not no.
Yeah, where it's like, okay, well, I mean, if you don't want advice, what are you doing here?
Well, that's always kind of been my thing. So Daniel and I both went to one of the 6-week workshops. Daniel went to Clarion West, and I went to Odyssey in the same year, I think. And that's actually how we met.
Were you 98?
98, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was very clear, like there were people who showed up at the workshop wanting to be validated. Like they wanted just everything. They wanted to be declared geniuses.
Right.
And that never works out well, because they never get declared the geniuses that they think they ought to be. And I went in wanting to be a sponge, and I learned so much. And I think if you're going to give your stuff to somebody to read and ask for honest feedback, genuine feedback, you have to be receptive to it. You can't immediately get defensive and tell them that they're wrong. because they're never going to read your stuff again, for critique anyway. And why else would you do it? If you think that the piece is ready for validation, you would be sending it, to your agent or your editor or whatever. You wouldn't be asking for feedback, I would think.
And yet there's also the thing where you need to be able to look at the notes that you're given, even when they're given by somebody who's much higher on the status chain or much more accomplished than you, and think, you're a very good writer, but you're wrong about this.
Right. Yeah.
On this point, I'm right. I'm standing by the story. You get some of those. It's the part where somebody's, you say, hey, I noticed that you're once again solving things with redemptive violence. That's kind of all you're doing here. Are you sure you want to do that? And it's like, that's all we're going to do. Okay, we're not going to simplify. Okay, all right. This narrative voice doesn't work, and I see you're going to triple down on it now. Okay. If you're not taking any of the notes, I don't know why you'd be having it.
Yeah.
Well, I think some people. The only people who have ever read their work before are like their mom and their best friend. And those people have only ever told them what geniuses they are and have not ever had to interact with somebody going, maybe this is not so good. And so it's a bit of a shock to the system. And I think occasionally get people at these writers groups come from that. And they're like, somebody is saying mean things about my work. That has literally never happened to me before, and I don't know how to process it.
Well, and to be fair, if you're looking for a beta reader, there are some readers who literally do like everything. Like they're not going to read critically. They're not going to. And this is, although with my mom, it's really great. I learned her language. She has a language, so she'll read my stories, and if she likes it, she'll say, "Oh, this is really good. I really liked it." If she doesn't, she'll say, "Well, this was nice." So at that point, it's like, okay, bless your heart, Mom. I love it. But that's okay. Like, it's okay. I love readers who love everything that they read and don't read critically. We need those readers, right? But they're not the people you want to be your beta reader.
You don't want them for your beta reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to see the things that are wrong with it.
I am bad in critique groups and I am bad as a beta reader. And the reason that I'm bad at those things is because if the story sucks me in, I don't notice any of the flaws. So if I notice any flaws in a work, the first flaw that has happened is the story hasn't sucked me in. So what if you're telling me an interesting story, I forgive almost everything.
Yeah.
This is all badly written and filled with grammatical errors, but the story is really sucking me in, so I'm just not going to see any of that. So that makes me bad at that job because, and it's also the reason why I can watch terrible movies and love them is because as long as the story is sucking me in, I don't notice the bad CGI. I don't notice all that stuff as long as I've been sucked in by what's happening in the story.
So yeah, there is. One of the things in picking a beta reader is picking somebody who does have a critical lens that you appreciate. And part of the thing with Carrie is that we were building our critical lenses at more or less the same time.
Yeah.
There's the kind of cohort thing of having come up at the same time and having been dealing with some of the same issues.
Yeah.
Kind of contemporaneously, that builds not just a kind of trust, but also an understanding of what the note means. That makes communication easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, does it go the other way, Carrie? Like when you send your stuff to Daniel as part of what you're looking for, the dude perspective, where Daniel's like, no dude would ever think or do this. Is that part of what you're looking for?
Not really, no. And I mean, occasionally I ask things like, what does it actually feel like to shave off a beard? That kind of thing. So, I mean, if you want to get into like the critical theory behind it all, like women have to spend a lot more time understanding how men work than men have to spend figuring out how women work. Because for women, understanding men is a matter of survival, and men it doesn't matter. And also, we end up reading a lot more books by men and about men than men end up reading about. And that's not a dig or anything. That's just how the culture works. So
that's just the water we're swimming in.
It's just the water we're swimming in. But what I do really appreciate is Daniel's attention to structure, to story structure, and also subtext. For lack of a better, there's all kinds of things. Like he's always points out where I fell down on world building, and not world building necessarily, but atmosphere building, like the right details, moving through a scene. Is it drawn in a way that's actually evocative? But yeah, also subtext. He's always picking up subtext that I had no clue that I was even putting in there. I'm just like, woo, let's have an adventure.
This seems to be a comment upon the nature of,
yeah. But yeah, but I trust him. Like I've sent him a couple of manuscripts that did not work. And when he comes back to me and says, these aren't working, for various reasons. And, that was kind of a rough time for me writing wise.
And I felt so bad doing it.
I know you did. I know you did. Because it was also, I was looking at those manuscripts going like, yeah, I can see that they're broken. I have no idea how to fix them. I have no idea what's wrong. But I trust Daniel. So it's like, I'm not going to, if they're broken, they're broken. And that's actually really great because we've kind of talked about this before. It's like, these days I've done self-publishing. I could, people ask like, oh, are you ever going to self-publish your trunk novels? And it's like, no, I'm not going to self-publish my trunk novels because they're not good. There is such a thing as novels that work and novels that don't, and good writing and bad writing. And I trust Daniel, and I think he was right. I trunk those. Maybe someday I'll go back to them, except I'm doing all of this really cool new stuff, and I would rather spend my time on the new stuff than go back to the stuff that wasn't working. Maybe someday, but I also kind of think those were both traditional fantasy, and I'm more and more thinking traditional fantasy just is not my shtick. It's not the thing that I do.
Not where your voice is.
Fantasy is for hacks.
Well,
no, fantasy.
Only hacks write fantasy.
And in my defense, being able, having a track record of saying this one's a miss means that when you bring me something and I say this is the shit. This is the shit. This is the real one. Yep. I have a certain credibility.
Yeah, with the Naturalist Society, Daniel didn't beta read that one, but I sent it to him to talk me off the ledge because I had gotten to a point where, like, the editing passes were done. It was about to go out for review. It was about to go out for ARCs. There's like all this stuff going on, and I lost faith in the novel. Like, there was a point where I was just like, I have no idea anymore, and I had gone through kind of a bad stretch, and so I sent it to him and I said, please just tell me if this is any good. And then he said, oh yeah, it's the best thing you've ever written. And it's like, okay, maybe now I can. Yeah. So talking off the ledge, that's another good task for beta readers.
This is another thing I am terrible at.
Yeah, no, so this true story. We were writing a book, me and Ty, and I had that dark night of the soul because that's a normal thing to do. And I wrote to Ty and I said, I think we fucked it up. I think this is it. I think we just... And he wrote back and said, yep. And I wrote back, thank you. I forgot who I was talking to. I don't know why I was coming to you for emotional support. It was a bad idea. I'm back. I'm good.
No. To be fair, I didn't just say yep. I said, yes, you have destroyed your career. You will never sell another book again. This is the
Yes, that was...
I will say, yeah, our loved ones get really tired of hearing that.
I know.
Another conversation with my parents, and I'm like, this is horrible. This book is terrible. And Mom says, well, you say that every time. And I say, well, this time it's really true. You say that every time also.
Yeah. I kind of used up all of my energy for that when Janae was in architecture school, because architecture is like going to medical school. It is brutal. The schedule is brutal, right? And so, she's going to school like 15 hours a day. She's getting like 3 hours of sleep a night. She's just a mess emotionally. And every time there was a big project, a big like end of the term project or whatever, every time I would go into her office, she'd be sitting on the floor surrounded by little tiny pieces of some incredibly complex model she was building, and she would be bawling. And she'd be like, I'm not going to get it done in time. I'm going to fail this project. It's going to ruin my GPA, like every time. And I'd be like, honey, it's going to be fine. You'll finish. You always do. She would finish it. She would get the top grade in the class because she always got the top grade in the class. She never didn't get the top grade. She would get the top grade. And by see, and then afterwards, she'd be so relieved. And I'd be, see, it always turns out that way. You have that dark night of the soul, but it's always okay. And then the next end of term, she'd be sitting on the floor, surrounded by little pieces, sobbing. And I learned that it has nothing to do with the past. It has nothing to do with track record. It is strictly a stress response in the moment that has no connection to reality. It's just that in that moment, that is the thing you have to go through.
Yeah, we've been doing this for 20 years now. And at this point, I do have like my mom's voice going, you've been through this before. It's going to be fine. But that doesn't stop it's terrible. Everything's, oh my God. Yeah.
And that is one of the things that having a beta reader addresses.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that you can get is, when we talk about the external perspective in terms of craft and internal perspective in terms of understanding nuance and structure, there's also just a certain amount of emotional support and validation that you need in order to, ooge through the project. There's so. In addition to the craft work, there's also a kind of community service thing going on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think that's huge.
Not with Ty. Not with Ty.
No. Ty makes margaritas.
Ty makes margaritas.
But
and if I drank, that would help. But
I also don't ask other people for emotional support. So I'm bad at giving it, but I'm also not somebody who demands it. So
you also don't accept it. Yeah.
I'm a black hole of emotional support. No emotional support escapes from me.
Yeah.
And you have an angry dog or something.
I have a husky cross. There's nothing I can do. Half husky, half border collie. It was a terrible plan.
Yes, I do make margaritas for Carrie. That's what I can do.
Well, you make margaritas for my wife. Cat drinks too. That's like emotional support. Getting my wife drunk. I don't know where that goes.
So
what other questions do you have about beta reading?
Well, those were the big ones. Was where you found your first beta reader, why you picked that person, and what it is that they're looking for when they beta read a project for you. I mean, that was my big questions.
So here, let me ask this, Carrie. Have you done any kind of beta reading on incomplete manuscripts?
I try not to.
And why?
I have, because you can't see the whole project, because endings are so important. So I want to see the ending to see if it's being set up. I actually kind of really hate critiquing first chapters. And it happens a lot. Like a lot of people want you to critique. I think that's because it's so difficult to ask somebody to read a whole novel. A lot of workshops get set up that like, here's the first 3 chapters. And it's really hard because, I'll end up kind of like micro critiquing whatever I get on the page. And then I get to the end and going, well, I think this is where you're going with it. I think this is the story you're setting up. I have no idea because I haven't seen it.
And whatever, I can't tell you if your ending lands at all. I can't tell you if your story is successful. Yeah. And
I actually give the advice, like, don't look, if you're writing a novel and wanting to get feedback, don't look for feedback until the whole thing is done. And that's kind of a truism. A lot of people, we've all run into the people who revise their first 3 chapters over and over and over again, and never kind of get past that. Or, the writers who have polished their first chapter to a gleaming shine, and then everything else just kind of falls after that.
Apart.
So novels are complete entities, and I prefer to treat them as such. Yeah.
I mean, Daniel and I have both read work by somebody who has basically rewritten the same novel for 25 years.
Oh,
And
it's hard.
It didn't get better. It didn't get better.
I have no patience for that. I will say the exception to that, and I think I've done this to Daniel a couple of times, is I will send somebody a couple of chapters just for proof of concept. Like, I started this thing. I have no idea if I should keep going on it. What do you think? But I think
if the scope is this a hook?
Yes. Yeah. But at that point, I'm not asking them. Once again, it's kind of that. I'm having a failure of confidence. Please talk me off the ledge.
Yeah.
I did know a writer who he would say, if somebody really, really pushed, like, I want you to read my thing, he'd say, send me the first page.
Oh, yeah.
Because his thing was, I can tell in one page, are you a writer?
Yep.
Is this clearly written? Is it well formatted? Is there an interesting premise being set up? Do the characters seem like real people? Is the narrative voice good? Like, all the things you can learn in a page. Say, I'm not critiquing your story. I don't know what the story is, but I can tell you in one page, I can tell you if you're a writer or not.
And a lot of people scoff, like a lot of non-writers or newer writers scoff that is possible, but it really is. And a lot of that is trust. We've all experienced that, though. It's like you pick up a book in a bookstore looking for your next read. You read the first page. And it's like, is this a voice I want to spend 300 pages on? Do I trust this author to carry me forward from this moment? We all do it, yeah. And
the folks who can do that, it's clear really quickly, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So I think what we're hearing here is that, like, there is something to be learned by, like, reading one page of a piece of work. That tells you something about the technical skills of the person who delivered that one page. And there's something to be learned by reading an entire novel. There's probably less to be learned by reading a couple of paragraphs or a couple of chapters. Yeah. Because what you're really looking for at that point is, does the story work? And you can't. Yeah. Because one of the things Daniel and I were asked about beta readers, and part of the reason we brought you on, we were asked a couple of weeks ago, do you get chapter by chapter notes? Do you send incomplete stuff? And our answer was no, we never do that. We never send part of the thing. And the answer is what you said, which is there's no way to judge whether the story was correctly setting up its climax without reading the climax. And I have read, I once read a 3-book series that was beautifully written by an amazing author who is very famous for good reason. And the first 2 books were setting up a story that I was fascinated by. And then the 3rd book didn't do anything with that story that the first 2 books had set up and just did some other thing. Yeah. And it was so disappointing. And I would never have known that, right? Without reading the whole thing, without reading all 3 books.
And here's the other problem. When you're doing something like The Expanse or like Captives War or like Kitty, where it is serialized and there is a big story, you can't wait 15 books to get a beta read.
No.
Yep.
So there's a and so there has to be a kind of standalone quality to the thing that you get critiqued, the thing that you work on.
And that was for Kitty. I did that very specifically. I wanted each book to stand alone. I wanted somebody to be able to pick up any of the book.
And we did that for The Expanse.
Yeah.
That's less true for like the Kithamar books that I'm writing, and I think it's less true for the Captives War stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be really interesting at some point after I retire to write a trilogy and have a beta reader look at the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
Have somebody who can look at okay, here's what you didn't do in book 1 that would have paid off in book 3, and see if that changes. That's a
big project.
Big experiment. That's a big experiment. That's a I'm going to do this thing and withhold publishing for a long time to get that feedback, which is why nobody does it.
Yeah.
And it's why it would be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at a certain point, you don't need the money. So you could get away with that experiment. If you are writing to pay your rent, you're not going to wait.
No.
Well, and that's ultimately like where a lot of this comes down to for working professional writers is you're on a deadline. And I know there were some kiddie books that you didn't beta read because I did not have time.
Yep.
Because the middle of the series, I was on a 6 month window for those, and there was just no time.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that it was so tight.
We were
doing 2 books a year. Yeah.
Wow.
One of the things Narain talks about with television is, the train starts going. You need to lay down that track.
Yep.
Because the train is rolling.
Yep.
Yeah. It's why movie writers have such a hard time transitioning into TV.
Oh, I bet.
Because with a feature, nothing gets shot until a million people have tinkered with the script.
Right.
And you just get used to that endless tinkering sort of version of writing. You get in TV, once you start the production schedule. And actually
stopping costs a lot of money at that point.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and Daniel and I were just talking to a friend of ours who we've been talking about doing a project with. She's on a TV show right now shooting, and she's a director, and she's talking about the fact that the scripts aren't coming on time. And she's talking about how frustrating it is to be a director when you don't feel like you can actually prep your story because the script hasn't shown up in time for you to prep it. And so it's like tying a huge weight around your ankle and jumping in the swimming pool. You know, I mean, you're just fighting to keep your head above water. You're not swimming anymore. And how frustrating that is. And that is the result of not keeping up that sort of grueling schedule of getting things done on time.
Which is to say, beta reading, while it is awesome, is also a luxury item. It's one of those things that gets cut when publishing starts interfering with the art.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you know, in TV, there is, if you're ahead of schedule, you can do things like deliver a script, have the showrunner read it, have the showrunner give you notes, give it back to you, do a rewrite pass, turn it in, have the room read it, have the room give you notes, maybe do a polish pass based on the room notes, and be involved at every step. Once you are behind the sticks, you turn your script in, the showrunner just rewrites it. Like they don't give it back to you, they just rewrite it because it's like, we're prepping this in 2 days.
I'm just going to fix it the way I like it, and then we're just going to, and your needs and desires no longer matter.
Yeah, and that is entirely driven by the schedule at that point. So I could totally understand, like, if you're doing 2 books a year, a lot of the luxury items, like having a beta reader read your stuff and give you feedback on it, just are going to fall off. That just goes away. Yeah,
which is the tension between the art and the commerce, right? Yeah. That's the when we talk about beta readers, and especially we talk about like uncompensated readers, because there are like sensitivity readers where we could like hire somebody who let's say wasn't white to see if we got that part right. That's not a bad idea, but it's, if you don't have someone who fits that niche in your circle in your cohort coming up, and you're asking somebody to do that, then you're paying somebody to do that. You're acknowledging and valuing their time and effort. Carrie and I get to express that by trading the work.
Yeah.
But if I was just sending shit to Carrie and saying, "Hey, edit this for me, would you? Because you're such a great guy," that would be a dick move. But all of that kind of artistic effort is on the one side of the scale, and then all of the get it in time to get the proofs done and on the shelf when we said we were going to do it. That's the other side. And those two are in tension. Those are always in tension.
Yeah, since this is, mostly going out to baby writers or wannabe writers, there are a couple of dangers in going after a beta reader that everybody should be aware of. And I think you're talking about one of the dangers. One of the dangers is you ask somebody to be your beta reader and they say no. And you can't be mad at that. You can't be upset that, they're doing you a favor. You cannot be like, I will never be your friend again because you refuse to beta read my book. Being a beta reader is hard work. especially if they're doing it right. If they're actually giving you useful critiques, useful notes, they put work into that. That's not easy. So if you ask somebody and they say no, that's not because they hate you. It's not, you shouldn't take it personally. The other one is don't ask if you're not going to listen to the note.
Right.
Yep.
Don't ask somebody to be your beta reader and then get angry when they don't love every word of your golden prose.
Yep.
Because then you don't understand what it is you're getting out of the relationship.
Well, and
be willing to trade. If you're asking people to be a beta reader, you have to be willing to do that yourself. Either, reciprocally or to, paying it forward to someone else down the road. But it should not be one-sided. And and you have to be receptive. I think that's a big mistake, is expecting one thing from your beta reader and not, being angry if you don't get that. That's not a good response.
Well, and also there's also the reciprocity of you're asking somebody to help you, and Carrie talked about paying it forward. This is a community. Writing is a community. Art is a community. When somebody comes to you and asks you for a favor, when someone comes to you and asks you for your critical feedback, remember all of the people who did you a solid before you say no. Also, talk to your lawyer, because there are some issues about plagiarism and opening yourself to liability that I'm not worried about with Carrie, because I don't think she's going to sue me. But anybody who's like just folks on the internet, because folks on the internet, they do. They say, "Hey, can you read my book?" And the answer for me at this point in my career is no. I can't. I will not read your book, because my lawyer and my agent would have my guts for garters, because I'll read it and then I'll write anything else anywhere in my career. And when you say I stole that from your beta read, I don't have any way to prove I didn't. So there's a tension there too.
If I beta read for somebody, I generally want to know where they live. There's somebody I know in real life and I've been to their house, that kind of thing. Which is kind of a bummer. Risk. Yeah, well,
and even then it's a risk. Even then you're
once you have reached a level of fame, notoriety, whatever you want to call it, that you have crazy people saying you psychically stole their work.
There ain't nothing going to stop that, though.
But once that has started happening, you should probably stop reading people's stuff.
And
this is the thing, where Carrie's been on the New York Times list. I've been on the New York Times list. There's the power dynamic there allows this. In a way that becomes problematic elsewhere. But still, as I look at the I'm mid-50s. I'm probably sliding in toward my retirement years before too many more books are out. Part of what I'm looking at is how
you'll be lucky to make it to the end of the week.
God, I know it, right? God damn. But the kind of formal teaching, formal situations where there is some protection for that kind of thing, is something that I think I'm interested in looking at as I go, because my cohort has gotten so small. I mean, when Karen and I were starting off, there were 20, 50 people going to conventions with us. We knew from the workshops, who we knew from Mile High Con and World Fantasy and Worldcon, people who we could view as our peers and our cohorts. And 20 years, everybody, every year there's a fewer people at the table. There's a few folks who've gone on to something else with their life, and it winds up being a smaller and smaller pool you can draw from.
Yeah, we've talked about this, that networking ends up being about meeting your peers and then traveling the road together. We've got this perception that networking is, schmoozing the right people and saying the right things. But for us, it was always, we met some really cool people and we all went on the journey together.
And now, I mean, one of my friends just finished a manuscript, Cameron Hurley.
Yep.
And I went to see The Prestige with her at a convention back when it was in the theaters. We've known each other that long. We have that relationship. If she wanted me to read her stuff, I would.
Yeah.
In a way that somebody who just came out of Clarion West and asked me for that, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. But, we do get asked. New writers do ask us. And we feel bad. And that's the thing. It's trying to explain why we have to say no. My response is always find somebody who's in exactly the place that you are and do the thing.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's
or speak to my lawyer first.
there was honestly a time I thought I was going to have to beat up a Polish guy. and the reason I thought I was going to have to beat up this Polish guy is because it was one of George's tours. We were going through Europe, and I was sort of being his man Friday on that one. And we were in Poland, and he did a signing there and a talk at this sort of cool little amphitheater kind of. It seemed like a place where stage plays would be done. It was really cool. But so we do the thing there, and this guy kept coming up to George, and I could tell he had a manuscript in his hand.
Oh yeah.
And he kept everywhere we went. This guy was always there, sort of following, and we were getting ready to leave, and George had gone around and glad-handed with everybody and talked to the publishing people and all that stuff, and met some fans and all of that. And we were getting ready to leave. We were heading to the car, and this guy was following us, and he kept trying to hand George this manuscript. And finally, he got in front of George, where George couldn't ignore him, and he was I've finished my first fantasy novel. I think you'll understand it. I think you'll get what I'm trying to do. I really love to have you read it. And tries to hand it to him, and George is doing the thing where you put your hands like this so that people can't put things in them. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't read your work. If it's an unpublished manuscript, I can't read it. And the guy kept trying to shove it in his hands. And finally, I just stepped between them and pushed the guy back. And I could see in his face that he was like he was deciding whether or not he wanted to fight. I could see it happening. He was so insistent that George take that manuscript with him that in his mind, he was like, this guy's between me and the thing that I want to have happen. Am I going through him? And I remember standing there thinking, I think I might be getting in a fight in Poland. And I was ready for it. I was ready. All right, let's do this. And then I could see that moment of this is not actually going to help me. Win or lose, I'm not going to be able, whether I win the fight or not, it's not actually going to get my manuscript into George's hands. And he backed off.
Oh.
But that level of insistence, it was so, you could see the need in this guy. It was
passion. I mean, there's so much passion in this gig.
And it sucks because there were published writers who mentored me when I was coming up. Susie Charnas, Fred Saberhagen, folks who I really appreciate and who did me a lot of good. And I wish it was safer. I wish it was safer to pay that forward than it turns out to be.
Yeah, it turns out that there has been some litigation over the last 20 years that made it much less safe for published writers to do that. I mean, what happened to what's her name who wrote the Dragon books? She got in trouble because she was crowdsourcing ideas on her website with her fans, and then one of her fans sued her. She's the one who wrote the dragons in the Napoleonic era.
Naomi Novik.
Naomi Novik.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't heard.
Yeah,
okay.
there was that lawsuit where she had been chatting with her. And I might be wrong about that. I might be misremembering. So this is not set in stone. But I believe it was her who she'd been chatting with fans on her website. This was pre-general internet.
This was back before we were all young
media.
and
it was before social media,
didn't
right?
know better.
The internet Paleolithic.
Right.
Yeah.
Chatting with fans on her website going, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you guys think? And they have hands, oh, you could do this, or you could do this, or whatever.
Yeah.
And one fan who had done a lot of that, like informal plot breaking, I guess we would call it, then later sued this writer. And I think it's Naomi Novik, but I could be wrong about that. Later sued the writer saying, oh, I should be getting a credit on this book. I helped write this book. I should be getting some of the money. That kind of stuff has a chilling effect.
Yeah.
On the whole, I want to involve other people in the process.
Yeah.
I mean, so in the James S. Corey writes a novel Patreon thing, which is where this video is eventually going to go up. Daniel and I do not read the comments. And we've been very vocally saying to everybody, please do not talk about the plot in the comments. We're never going to read them. Don't ask us questions there. So if you ask questions in the comments, we're never going to see them. Yeah, so periodically, Daniel and I will do a question and answer thing where we specifically ask for questions that we can then answer. But there's a chilling effect that if somebody wrote in one of the comments, hey, I think you guys should do this, and then we end up doing that thing, that then that person comes back later and says, I helped write the book. I should be getting some of the money.
Yeah. And so the trouble with beta readers. There you go.
Yeah.
There's some pitfalls.
Yeah. I do critiquing through the Odyssey writing workshop now. And I mean, knock on wood, but I hadn't thought of that. But I think what you were saying about being under the auspices of a formal relationship, like it's very formal at that point. Like Gene moderates everything. The understanding that they're going to send something in and get comments back, and but also generally, I've never once come across an idea I wanted to use. So that's the other thing.
That's the other thing. Ideas are the cheap part. Ideas are easy.
Yeah, but people don't understand that. No. Some people don't understand that.
All right. Is there any other
on that
uplifting note? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. My next manuscript is due on Monday, so I may be dropping Daniel a line.
I am always at your disposal.
Looking it over. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, if you ever just want people to read your stuff and tell you how great it is, just send it to Janae.
Yes. We need those people as well. I very much appreciate the unadulterated validation. Is that what we can call it?
So Janae's thing is she either loves something or she hates it. It's one or the other. It's never in the middle. It's so if she doesn't like it, then she hated it. So yeah. So that's probably not as nuanced as you need from a beta reader, but if you want an extreme reaction, she's great at extreme reaction.
Oh, excellent.
Right.
And I do have one other question, Carrie. Is there someplace online that anybody can read that unicorn story?
I want to say yes, but I'm not going to remember where. I want to say Lightspeed or Nightmare has reprinted it. So Lightspeed magazine has a bunch of my stuff.
If it's out there, I want to put a link to it in this because I think people are going to want to see the story.
I'll hunt for it. I'm pretty sure it is. The title is A Hunter's Ode to His Bait.
Yep.
Which is kind of long and complicated, but it makes it easy to find, and it has been reprinted here and there. So, but I'm pretty sure. I want to say it's Lightspeed that reprinted it. But I'll hunt up that link for you and send it on.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you for agreeing to do this. So now, when you have a Patreon thing, we owe you one.
Yeah,
I do have a Patreon.
Well, I mean, if you're posting videos to it, Daniel and I owe you a reciprocal video.
Excellent. I'll have to think about something cool to do.
Well, and when we get to this point with the one we're writing on this project, we will send it to you and bring you back.
Awesome.
That sounds good. We do need a beta reader because it's kind of a girl book. So we need your female perspective.
Oh, that sounds kind of flattering that I actually can have a female perspective. I'm not always very good at being a girl, so
Nobody is. It's a loser's game. There's no way to win it. There's no way to win it.
Gender's a construct. Yes.
So's money. I like money.
Yeah. Well,
I got nothing against gender either. Okay, but
Are we done?
I think we're cooked.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. Always
Well,
enjoy
thank you
talking
for
with you
agreeing
guys.
to do it at the last minute to cover
Yeah.
for the fact that we didn't have anything ready this week.
Yeah.